Hi, everyone, and welcome to the October 5th episode of Code for Truth. I'm Tom Mchea, and I am here with Peter Brown.
Hello again.
And Ryan Davis from Giant Bomb.
Hi. I'm back.
Yes.
They couldn't keep me out of the studio.
No, you were too good last week.
So we'll see what happens with week 2. It's exciting. I feel like now expectations are set.
They're really high.
So I'm going to have to start saying like racist shit or something. I'm not sure. Like what's the angle? How do I ratchet it up from last week?
Well, we'll get into racist stuff right away, and we're also going to talk about EA's IPs and Resident Evil 6.
Okay.
But we're starting things off with Pardon Our Blunders.
Oh, what did we screw up last week?
Well, according to Endor BR...
Well, he's an authority on screwing up.
I call BS on the Vita dishing. You either like handheld gaming or you don't. The Vita hasn't even been international launch for a year, so of course it doesn't have a large lineup of unique titles yet. It does have accessibility of a lot of older titles with the PS1 classics. It does have several good specific titles with more coming. Sony has announced plans for a lot of features and incentives.
Gotta love plans.
I mean, and I know it's kind of like an apples and oranges thing, but the issue with handhelds in general right now is, you know, they're fighting the smartphones, they're fighting the iPhone, even if it's like, oh, the games are totally different. That part's true, but there's still the fact of, am I going to carry the thing that I'm going to carry anyway that can do games well enough, that can fill the time that I need filled by handheld gaming, or am I going to spend nearly $300 on a thing that only does that and only has a handful of games to do it with?
That is a problem.
And it took Nintendo a long time with both the DS and the 3DS to find a toehold. Those systems did not launch with barn burner lineups, so
not even close.
So there's still a chance.
I'm very open with my biases. I am biased against mobile gaming because every time I've played it, I don't like it. So I really want the 3DS and the Vita to succeed. And maybe that's why last week I was more exuberant about the Vita's current lineup, because I really like the hardware. I like a lot of games on it, and I want more, and I want to sell. So
fair enough.
That's where it is. No one's gonna be mad that I'm biased against mobile gaming. I love that.
By all
Peter
means,
Brown,
Thomas.
you can
Okay,
go.
all right. So Ann Carlson said that we were kind of mixed up about Valve and their plans. Regarding Valve, I think everyone is just craving for a new piece of tech. We're having high hopes, and I think we're going to be disappointed with whatever they come up with.
Wow, set yourself up for disappointment.
There's maybe a kernel of truth to that. There's a lot of expectations on anything Valve does, right. And when something's been kind of brewing for this long, and it again with Steam, it took them a while, but we're now at the point in hindsight where everyone sees Steam as the savior of PC gaming, right? Like it's this. How did we live without it? It's this great thing. So with those sort of expectations on the software end, and I think this hunger for new gear, we talked about this some on last week's show, I think is 100% true. I think people just want something. Yeah. So if that something also ties into what is right now, hands down, the strongest platform for games, PC, I can see why expectations would be crazy high.
Yeah.
Do you guys think there's a possibility that they might just shelve whatever their plans are? Assuming that maybe they get to the point
absolutely.
Where they're like, maybe we were wrong.
They are run like Nintendo, where they'll spend $1 billion in R&D and then throw it out the window.
There's always the old stories of there were like 5 Half-Life 2s.
Right.
Of or even the first Half-Life, the original Half-Life. They built that game and scrapped it and built it and scrapped it several times over before they got to what they're happy with. We
saw the boring-looking Team Fortress 2 before they released the good-looking one.
They're not going to ship something I don't think they're confident with.
I don't think they're ever going to ship anything with this. And one last comment from XAVVOR1. Zavor1. Ryan Davis is perfect for portraying the average game arguments. He asks the questions I imagine fanboys would ask of the big video game corporations. Good show. So
fanboys.
People seem to like your presence, so we're going to get into the big stuff. This Week in Truth.
All right.
Where we talk about the biggest news stories of the week.
What are the biggest news stories of the week, Tom?
Well, we're starting off with Peter.
Peter.
All right, so Cliff Bleszinki ended his 20-year tenure at Epic. A lot of people seem to...
I'm sorry, you mean Epic Mega Games, please.
Pardon me. Epic Mega Games. And fans have kind of mixed emotions. Some people thought he was kind of outspoken, kind of a brute, I guess. But then others point out, this guy has been around there for a while, right? It's not just Gears of War. It's not just Twitter that, he's had a presence on. He was involved with Unreal Engine early on, Unreal Tournament. He's got kind of a big influence.
Oh, yeah.
He's not saying that he's leaving the industry proper, right? I mean, that's kind of...
He's taking a break
taking
from the
a break.
industry. It's
Yeah.
not him. It's me. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't blame him for perhaps wanting to distance himself from that style of game. I mean, I don't know his involvement directly with Fortnite, other than he's kind of supported it a little bit. But
Yeah.
that game seems to have some interesting things going on.
Well, my first thought was this: is if Epic Games they're like they have pillars right now.
Yeah.
They have their technology, their engine. They have stuff that's more casual, which is their iOS Infinity Blade, and you can put Fortnite into the mix also. And then you have what Cliffy B did, which is the hardcore mega blockbusters. Of those three, you can remove that third one, and they don't miss a beat. So I don't think that financially they will be hurt very much with this because their games are almost just to show their tech, and their tech is so ubiquitous that it doesn't even matter at this point.
I say get rid of their mobile stuff too. The Unreal Engine on its own is enough to
Their
keep
mobile
them afloat.
stuff prints money. They are
Yeah,
stealing money.
the
from
amount of
the
money.
US Treasury.
The reason that there is not a Shadow Complex 2 is because Infinity Blade makes such disgusting money
Yeah.
for them that it's not worth Chair's time
Right,
to
okay.
work on that stuff. So,
I think
I would rather have
Mobile stuff rather than
more kind of, if we're going to call it that,
Real games.
hardcore, real games. Especially from Chair and from Epic alike. But I think the big loss to Epic from this is not vision, it's not technical chops, it's a face man.
Yeah, he's
There are very few face men in this business that can do what Cliff can do. You always hear the stories from the big E3 press conferences where you have some developer get up there and they read very dryly from the teleprompter and they seem very stiff and unnatural and they're just going by what's written. But when Cliff gets up there, he'll maybe have bullet points on the teleprompter. Maybe.
Right.
And he just talks because he's confident that way and he's able to articulate himself that way. And that's a rare combination.
Yeah.
And that's something that has served Epic, especially when it's getting into the games, not getting into, but when it's talking about actual games, when it's not talking about its mobile business, when it's not talking about its engine business, that's where they really benefit from it. So
Yeah, I agree.
they don't have anyone that really, Rod Ferguson is, by all accounts, a solid lead.
He went to Irrational Games, right?
But he's gone,
He's
right?
gone.
So there's not really. I don't know what the bench looks like as far as people of that caliber at Epic. So I think that's the big loss ultimately is having a
good front man.
a good front
it's
man.
It's impossible to replace
good
him
advocate.
because whether you love him or hate him as a spokesperson, everybody trusted him. He has credibility because he's actually he has a good game development mind. He's not just Randy Pitchford, who's kind of like a blowhard. Like Cliffy gets on stage and he's made great games and he recognizes great games that he didn't make. And
I'm not gonna.
And then can you believe him?
Take issue with calling Randy Pitchford a blowhard. He speaks passionately and often, lets the enthusiasm get the better of him. I don't think it's deliberate as far as like misleading people.
He will lie to your face for one more sale. Like he does not care. He does. I don't trust him with game quality. And I guess that's what separates. Because Cliffy, I don't really like him personally, but he earned my respect because he's great at making games. Well, and that's why he's irreplaceable from.
But I think that's a perception thing. I don't know how much involvement he actually had in developing, Gears of War 3.
Yeah, like after Unreal Tournament, I mean, tough to say.
We can't talk about him as a developer because we don't know. All we can say is the way he presented himself and the way that he interacted. And what he has also is, though, a certain amount of cred because he started so long ago and was doing, grunt ass work in the side scrolling 2D days,
Jazz Jackrabbit,
Jackrabbit days of Epic. That's like, this isn't just some puka shell necklace wearing motherfucker who came out of nowhere. It's like, no, this puka shell necklace wearing motherfucker has been around. They didn't just get him for his good looks.
Yeah.
So that's a loss.
So Peter, he stepped away, but you think he's going to come back and make games? Like, what do you think Cliffy B is without Mark Rain's technology behind him?
That's a good question. I think he can get people together. I think he has the ability to possibly form his own team with perhaps some of his own wealth, because he's supposed to be worth $15 million or something like that. That's enough to get a small thing going.
Regardless of his own wealth, he's got enough of a track record that he could say, "Hey, invest in me."
Well, exactly right. So, I mean, no matter what it takes, I think he could start something and could attract the right people to have something come from that. He's got good taste. He could,
And here we have Cliff Bleszinki on the phone.
Oh God.
Yeah, no, I think he's going to be involved in gaming, if not at least entertainment in some form down the line. I think it would be foolish for him to like go into something else. Like,
all right, let me ask you guys a question then. What's your dream team for Cliffy? Like, what's the fucking Cliff Bleszinki A team that he puts together on his own? Now that he can, the world is his oyster. Yeah. Cliffy B.
You're asking what people I want him to work with, or what game I'd want him to work on?
Let's make it a two-parter. What people? Because for me, my secret, dark, stupid little dream is that Cliff is the one person who could bring Jay Allard out of retirement.
This is your dream?
Get two of the best faces this industry has ever seen together. Now, it may be too much. That may be an issue of too many Chiefs, not enough Indians.
Right.
With having both of those cats, but if there is a single person who would have both the capacity and I imagine a certain level of the desire to try and bring back Jay, it's Cliff. As far as
do you have a person with that before we move on to the dream game?
That's tough. I mean, because like I said, like we were saying, we don't really know his involvement, so I don't know what he can bring to the table. Right?
The way that I see him is he understands gameplay.
Yes.
He understands how gameplay systems work together. He knows how to make something that's fun and fast and exciting and accessible.
So does he then need to be with someone who he can balance out with that? Like a good artist, perhaps, to sort of rein in their, wild ambitions with creativity?
My first thought, Ninja Theory.
Yeah.
Ninja Theory, I love Ninja Theory. They don't have any kind of street cred with gaming because they don't make great moment-to-moment action. The games aren't that good from that perspective. They have great visual design. They have great story construction. They have great cutscenes. And if you have the credibility and the knowledge of Cliffy B into the mix, all of a sudden people care about DMC.
Well, the thing is, DMC is pretty fun. Have you played the new one?
Yes. Well, I love Ninja Theory. I'm just saying from kind of an outsider perspective, I think that he would give them the credibility they lack right now in gameplay.
At first, I thought you meant Ninja Blade, which I'm like, that's a weird pick.
Oh,
that's a weird game to choose to champion.
Cliffy B.
Finally, somebody could do Ninja Blade the justice that it deserved. Cliff Bleszinki, you're the man.
So as far as what we want him to make, I don't even know a genre because I almost want to just leave it to him. It's gonna make something action. He's gonna make something over the top and bombastic, and that's fine if it's a platformer or if it's a shooter. He understands how to make fun stuff.
He should buy and take the Jazz Jackrabbit name with him.
Oh, God.
And reboot it for the 21st century.
Epic would give it to him as a parting gift.
I think he was quoted recently as saying that him and one of the original guys were thinking about doing that, but then it was just shelved. And they're like, in our spare time, maybe.
And just what a stupid, bloody, jar-headed, event that would be.
Well, the guy he was talking to wanted to make it a first-person shooter.
Of course.
Okay. Well, we're gonna wrap this up.
That would be exciting. That would be the most exciting. Is whatever it is that he does, regardless of genre, of anything else, not a first-person shooter, not a shooter.
Yeah.
I'd love to see him, put his skills to use on something just so radically different. Which I have to imagine is, in part why he would choose to leave Epic. At a certain point, he's done all that he can at Epic. He probably feels that he can, build the Cliff brand on his own and create something from scratch that will, exceed, and he'll have more control over it once he does that. But I would love to see him, flex those muscles some.
As long as it's not iOS.
We're gonna one more note here.
Okay.
Random thought. Him and Adam Sessler as producers at a studio. That might be pretty interesting.
I love that Sessler as what he did at G4. I loved him. I mean, I don't know if he can make a game.
No, I'm not. Well, I'm talking
as a producer,
strictly from like, hey, we have Cliff Bleszinki and Adam Sessler.
Considering that Sessler's views mirror my own about games, he loves worlds, he loves characters.
He's got opinions that I respect. So
that would be interesting.
Anyway, that was silly.
We're gonna close this out with just a quote from our user, Our Sin 360. I feel like a lot of these developers are seeing where gaming is headed and not liking what they see. It's an ominous note, but now we're going to move on to EA. We will die without new IPs. The EA Games executive, Patrick Soderlund, says that the software giant will slowly die if they cease making new games. It's an entertainment business. You have to surprise people, and you have to take risks. If you don't, you die. So, is there truth to this? or is he kind of overstaying? Because we love new IPs, but as far as mass market appeal, is there, do you need to keep changing the faces that appear on the boxes, or can you just keep making the same game over and over as long as it's good?
As long as there's new elements introduced, then yes, I think you can continue a series.
So you think new IPs from a consumer perspective, not from us, are overrated?
See, that's weird because I don't feel like consumers really clamor for new IPs necessarily.
I think that this is some bullshit rhetoric coming from someone at EA right now, because this is like almost word for word the sentiment that John Riccitiello was spewing out there prior to the launch of Dead Space and Mirror's Edge.
Yeah.
That was their thing at the time. And that was kind of like that, remember that weird brief window of a couple of years where EA was awesome, where it's like, wow, they are taking risks, they are establishing new IPs, and they're doing interesting stuff with it.
Yeah.
And then the market rewarded them accordingly by no one ever buying any of those games, forcing them to then ditch Mirror's Edge entirely, although by all accounts they have made and unmade several versions of a sequel to Mirror's Edge, and iterate the shit out of Dead Space, which has dividends have been paid on that to a certain extent, but I haven't met anyone that feels super confident about Dead Space 3 at the moment. So I don't think.
So what do you think?
I think that's an interesting.
Do you think IPs, like not just getting away from EA, but just everything? How important are new IPs compared to old IPs?
Consumers need to not hear the term fucking IP ever.
Right, yeah.
I think that when you talk about AAA and units and first weeks and all that jazz, that's not the consumer's concern. The consumer should, you shouldn't call yourself a consumer. The people that are playing the game should care about the games. The inside baseball, that can be entertaining for people, and I understand why they're attracted to it and are interested in it to a certain extent. But
a new property or not, people are going to get excited about a game for different reasons other than it's new.
Yeah. But it should be about the game. Yeah. If the game is good, regardless of there's familiar elements, there's a character that you've seen, there's a universe that you've been to. Whatever, just make the games good.
His one argument, because I agree with what we're saying so far, his one argument that I really agreed with this is you have to have new IPs because your developers can get burned out if they have to keep making FIFA. And I think that's a very valid point, and it's why you see people, not to put Cliffy B necessarily, but I think people like Cliffy B sometimes drop out of the industry because they're kind of bored of doing the same thing over and over.
Yeah, but you shouldn't also force a new series, right? There should be
there should be an idea.
Yeah, there should be an idea where that grows out of. I mean, because otherwise, that's doing it for the wrong reasons.
But what makes this sentiment bullshit coming from this guy at EA is the fact that. EA is not going to walk this walk right now. All right, this is not, even if he truly believes this, which I suspect that he does. That, man, we need to have fresh blood, new IP. We need to not just go back to the well on these same franchises over and over again, like with Old Republic shit in the bed like it did. Them being in pretty dire straits financially because of that. Like, that was supposed to be one of their big pillars, and it is not holding up.
The lead developer has left today.
Yeah, that's breaking news from Peter Brown.
But that's a ship that's been sinking before that game launched. They're not going to be in a position to take those sorts of risks. They were in a better position. They were the coffers were full when Riccitiello had the initiative of let's launch a bunch of stuff. Let's sink some real money into some big new franchises and IPs, and they got spanked for it. And they're still, I think, to a certain extent, reeling from that. Even so, even if the guy believes it, there's no way that EA is going to act on that as an initiative.
The thing that's strange to me is that EA has fantastic IPs. I think we can all agree about that, and they don't really utilize them well because they have Medal of Honor, which is a second tier franchise, and instead of like doing something new and unique, they're kind of ripping off Call of Duty.
They don't know what to do with it.
That one.
They really don't know what to do with it.
It seems like they should capitalize on their IP brands. Like Crysis is another one where it's kind of perverted what it started out as to become more like everything else. Like, why not take these names that we know and make them unique so they're building their own place? Because they sell a lot.
I have one word for you.
It sells a lot of name alone, though.
Syndicate.
Syndicate is actually a game I will champion.
No, I agree, but that game sold for shit. I'm saying as
but
far
that's
as
not a name that people care about right now. Like if you put
then what are the games that they are not utilizing that they should be?
well, I mean, Battlefield last year.
And Battlefield 3 was phenomenal. I don't think you can knock that.
They made a bad single player though, because they're trying to ape something else. Like why not take it in a direction that's unique and interesting and different, while still having the strengths of the multiplayer to fall back on? Like why would they rip off someone else? What is the advantage?
Because when they attempt to do something original, they are rebuffed for it.
Yeah, it's like the Mirror's Edge story.
It's the Mirror's Edge story, and it's the Syndicate story.
IP. Like we've kind of
It's
established
the Syndicate story. Then
people really like.
Which one do you want? Do you want it to be the new IP or do you want it to be the old IP? Because both times that they have tried to do something original and fresh with IPs, and there's love for Syndicate. That's the only reason that they would have made a new
Syndicate.
Syndicate.
Not a big name though, because there's a PC.
But what's the big name that they don't have?
That's an example. Like why would they do what they do with the single player for Battlefield? Like what is the advantage for them to do that?
Because I think people come to expect a single player thing.
But a Call of Duty,
but it doesn't matter.
Not as good.
But it doesn't matter.
Counterintuitive.
It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. The single player in Battlefield's irrelevant.
Well, it's not. It's not made it irrelevant though.
No, because no one buys Call of Duty for the single player. No one buys Battlefield for the single player.
We actually just had a story this week where the guys who are making the new Black Ops 2, they talked about how they're sad that so many people only play single player, not multiplayer. Like a lot of people do like the single player.
That's crazy
talk. Yeah,
it is, but it's true. There's a lot of people do that. Like, why would you ignore this aspect if you're going to sink money into it? And I guess that's what's frustrating with EA is they have these IPs and just make interesting, unique games slapping on that license.
Okay, well, how about Battlefield Bad Company? That first one
example of how to do it right.
Was an original, original story. It was, it had a great, unique personality. It was funny. It was fun. They utilized the destructible environments well.
That's a plus in every category. And EA needs more games like that and less games like Crysis 2. I thought was a step back. Like I don't want them to homogenize their products when they're already using the IPs over and over again.
That is a problem. I'll agree with you with that. The constantly chasing.
Look at Dead Space 3.
Activision, basically,
and just cry looking what happened to Dead Space 3. Because Dead Space is unique and interesting.
I haven't played it yet, and there was a lot of concerns leading up to Dead Space 2. But I agree that what I've seen is not instilling me with a lot of.
It just seems like a lot of like, hey, me too. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got some comments from people. I like this one a lot from Paparolo. He just says, let me guess the new IP names: Medal of the Battlefield of Honor, FIFA versus Madden 2013, Dragon Effect 123, Sims in the City. This last one is my favorite. I love it. Crysis in the Dead Space. I would buy that game.
I would buy a FIFA Dead Space hybrid.
FIFA Dead Space sounds like the soccer team that crashed in the Andes, which sounds super fun too. I would have no problem if EA did this and went crazy with their IPs, combining them. But Crysis in the Dead Space?
Is Sims in the City not already? Isn't that already? I feel like that had to have been a expansion pack somewhere along the way.
Dragon Effect 123. I think that would be
terrible. They couldn't have let that stone remain unturned.
We had one guy, Talavaj, who corrected the quote, saying, absolutely working all the time on acquiring new IPs through hostile buyouts.
Yeah.
Fix the quote for us.
This is what EA does. This is what Microsoft does, is they buy outside companies, and for better or worse. If you ask Westwood, it's worse. If you ask Origin, it's worse. If you ask Bullfrog and Looking Glass. Boy, the list of casualties is staggering. BioWare might be on that list.
Yeah, but if you want to focus that on Activision, it's just as fucking brutal.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what Neversoft is doing right now? Making Call of Duty maps.
Really?
You know what name any acquisition of Activision's that was originally purchased for some other series or type of game?
I don't want to hear the answer to this. I'm going to ask him anyway. What is Ravensoft doing?
Making Call of Duty
Ravensoft.
Maps. I know. That is a fucking war crime. Activision should be tried at the fucking Hague for what they have done to Raven. Raven was an amazing developer. I thought Singularity was grossly underrated. Marvel Ultimate Alliance is one of my favorite games of this generation by a landslide. Wow. I thought it was just genius, just brilliantly put together, and just awesome fan service, and just a fun action RPG in its own right. And to see all of that talent being flushed away on, being squandered on Call of Duty fucking map packs.
This goes back to the new IPs. I mean, Activision is kind of in our boat where consumers, customers, gamers, they don't care about new IPs. They just want good games. And Call of Duty is a good game, so they're going to put all of their resources.
Well, this is not. I mean,
all on
it's
franchise.
It's an easy pattern to recognize from Activision. This is not some like sudden development. You go back to, let's take it back to late 90s, early aughts with Tony Hawk, when they were out there buying every single developer they could that was making a Tony Hawk-like game already.
Oh, yeah.
You know, guys like Shaba getting picked up and then putting them onto the O2 line. Remember, they established an entire sub-label, Activision O2, just for their extreme sports games, and every single one of those was Tony Hawk on blank. It was Tony Hawk on a snowboard, Tony Hawk on a wakeboard, Tony Hawk surfing. You know, it was that thing every single time.
Who was the cover athlete for wakeboarding?
Kelly Slater.
Was it Kelly Slater?
Was that the one
Yeah.
that came with the thing that you?
No, wait,
attached to the
wakeboarding?
Yeah.
No, wakeboarding was Wakeboarding Unleashed. That was the one where it was some dude wakeboarding, and then it was far enough along. That was like the last one they did, and it was far enough along that they had to change up the name and call it
my
Wakeboarding
God.
Unleashed.
This is a terrible time for gaming.
Which was actually wasn't.
wakeboarding one was good.
That one was okay.
I liked
that was
that
better
one.
than that had any business being.
Better than BMX Triple X.
But once they tapped that well,
Yeah.
once they exhausted the market and no one was buying those anymore, they either
those studios.
they canned the studios or they moved them on to the next thing. The next thing ended up being Guitar Hero. And then when Guitar Hero came along, guess what? Everyone in on Guitar Hero. Neversoft doing Guitar Hero, Shaba doing Guitar Hero, all those other studios that were originally skateboarding games are now doing rhythm games. And now that, and then after that dried up, on to Call of Duty. So that's their thing. They find the one franchise that makes them money and they just fucking hammer on it.
I know. Like
until it is dead.
We rip on Nintendo because they recycle IPs, but Nintendo at least keeps a stable of games that they don't make sequels to. So we're constantly clamoring for new F-Zero, and Star Fox and other ones that are like that's at least smart enough to kill everything.
They're mining for energy but they're trying to do it as responsibly as they can. Whereas Activision is just fracking.
Yeah.
They're just scorched earth.
the land.
Like, all we care about is the next quarter. Whatever happens beyond the next quarter, that's not my fucking problem. My problem right now is the end of this quarter, and I will wring everything that I can out of it.
Yeah, Activision is like the furthest to the side you can be about, like, they don't do anything new, they don't do anything interesting, they do the same thing over and over. That's as far as you can be in that camp, and it's a little scary.
Well, at least that's the directive. I think still good stuff can bubble up, and good stuff can happen in that environment, but it's not going to be very original, or
it's Blur and it gets destroyed at retail, and that's it. Even though the game is new and original and fun, and
poor Blur,
poor
Bizarre. Talk about also another tragedy. The way Bizarre Creations was treated at the hands of Activision was a real bummer.
Yeah. So we're gonna wrap this up with one quote from Franzito. What's the point of new IPs if they pretty much get screwed in the long run? Me and Dead Space fans will just be lucky if the third part won't be messed up by EA. And I chose that as the final quote because it leads us directly into Capcom. Resident Evil can't please everybody.
We don't have to listen to our fans.
I know.
Resident Evil tell us what they want.
That's hilarious because that's all they did with Resident Evil 6 was try and please everyone.
Yeah, right?
That's the MO for that entire fucking game is what do you guys want? You want more Umbrella? Okay, Umbrella's back. Oh, we killed Wesker, but you want more Wesker? We have Wesker's kid. How about, I don't know.
Put everything. So Resident Evil 6 executive producer Hiroki Kobayashi said the game development can't be rendered by fans' expectations. Quote, we do not listen to the fans, but we can't be beholden to them at every turn, or I don't think we'll ever make progress in terms of the series development. So where do you guys fall on this issue? Do you think that, like, franchises should stay a certain way? And that changes are for what new IPs, or do you not mind blowing things up?
It's case by case. There's no blanket answer to this question. There are games that desperately need to be retooled to remain relevant, and it's a fine touch. Also, you can go too far one way or the other.
Yeah, do you refine or do you reinvent? And in this case, they've pretty much if coming from 5, they haven't reinvented the game, but they've gotten pretty close.
What they did with 6 was they did listen to their fans too much. Yeah. And they also, and this is just a issue in Japanese game development across the board, is they chase what they think is popular with the Western audience. It's like what are the games that are selling in the US and in Europe right now? What can we do to emulate those? But it's the issue of not it's a straight up. Oh, I said I was going to get racist. Here it comes. It is a straight up cultural disadvantage. It is without being steeped in it, without really knowing it from a personal level. Like, you can see mechanically what needs to be done, but you're not going to get the nuance of it. You know, there's certain. It's like, you know, I grew up in a world where everyone drove cars. You know, I grew up in cars, around cars. I sat in the passenger seat, familiar with, you know, just car culture in general, right? It was part of my life, part of my world. So that when I got into the driver's seat for the first time when I was, 15, getting my learners, a lot of this stuff was already very natural to me. I understood, like, okay, this is the way traffic lights work. Even if I had never driven a car, I still, just through sheer osmosis, figured out, all right, this is, how pedals work, and I got to use my blinker, and, I've got windshield wipers, and this is how I go into gear, and all that kind of stuff. Whereas if you're coming from someplace that doesn't have that, you're learning from scratch the whole thing. And I think that's the position that a lot of Japanese developers are coming from, is that they have to learn the whole thing.
So would you say that, like, because Western developers also look at the charts and see what sells and then turn Dead Space into a shooter, would you say that, like, the homogenization...
They do, but you know what they do? They do it well.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. Is the problem that when the Japanese developers do it, it's just poor? Though they do it well, I can't actually think... My first example was be Shadow of the Damned, but that's not actually Western ripoff. That's Resident Evil 5 ripoff. But it's really well done.
But Shadows of the Damned is not great because it's a shooter.
It's great because of everything around
because of
the
everything
core
else.
Yeah.
If Shadows of the Damned had been something other than a shooter, I probably would have liked it more.
More of an adventure game or something?
Yeah. Because the action parts of it were clumsy and
the action adventure parts
and
of
like
that were...
And the parts where you're like going through the stupid purple smoke stuff and there was the time limit, that was terrible.
I loved that stuff.
That was the stuff that I had to survive through to get to the great weird character stuff.
I love that stuff. But they basically remade that game with Lollipop Chainsaw, and it wasn't nearly as interesting anymore.
So, like, when I see all the changes to gameplay they're doing with Resident Evil, what bothers me is that they're kind of neglecting what most fans liked, I think, about the past was the story, right? Coupled with the tension and the survival aspects.
Sure.
Okay.
All of that has kind of been abandoned.
But also there was a specific, say what you will, one way or the other, I could never reconcile the... Like, RE4 over the previous Resident Evils is an undeniable step in the right direction. Like, that game...
The controls are so much better.
Yeah, you could even really argue at a certain level that, that game is responsible for a lot of the modernizations in shooters that we see across the board,
yes,
not just Japanese games.
That was the first modern third-person shooter.
But it did still have a very deliberate feel to it. And I was never able to really reconcile for myself not being able to move and shoot. Just because I came from the West, the kind of games that looked like that, played in a faster, more dynamic fashion, doesn't mean that it's invalid what RE4 and what RE5 were trying to do. The problem is that they took what they did really well with those games and then they sacrificed it for something that they didn't do quite as well, which is a more dynamic, a more Western style action game.
But they try to ground it in Resident Evil, which I think is a huge mistake if you're going to try to change a formula. Take what you've learned from something and make a new thing with it without trying to keep it within this box.
Like DMC.
But I mean, whatever.
The first Devil May Cry was supposed to be Resident Evil, and they're like, "This isn't Resident Evil. What are you turning into another franchise?" Like,
but whatever. They did that. They did that with from 3 to 4. Like they made some profound changes to the gameplay there.
It worked in that case.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it doesn't.
But I guess I'm going back to the original question about how do you change a franchise through the years. For my stance is if you keep what defines the franchise, and for Resident Evil it's tension. In some capacity it's tension. It's not necessarily horror. It's tension. And if you keep that, and you can change whatever else you want, but you have to keep that because that's the core, that's the kernel. I didn't have a problem with Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts because that is still Banjo. They changed the gameplay, but it's still Banjo. It still has the humor and the art style and the inventiveness, so that's fine. What they did with Resident Evil 6 is they destroyed what makes Resident Evil in the first place, and that's why people are so pissed about it.
I think that's spot on, but I also think that it is a specific challenge to be able to identify what is the thing at the core. Because you're right. Like with Resident Evil, you could say, what do you need for a Resident Evil game? Well, you need zombies, you need boss fights.
It's all like outside
you need a mansion.
Though.
But you're right. But it's easy for someone to go like, oh well, these are the things that that are prominent in every Resident Evil game, so we have to have that stuff. But when it comes down to it, you're right. That is the thing that you need for Resident Evil is tension, is that there needs to be some sort of slow building dread. And that's why the not being able to move and shoot at the same time, while not something that I would apply to every single game, and something that I didn't like personally because I found it frustrating, I can respect and makes sense for Resident Evil. So,
and it's not like it was a technical limitation. Those towards the second and third games, and those were kind of like design choices for that.
Oh, those are very deliberate.
Yeah, so,
very deliberate.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, Tom, I definitely agree with you, but I also think that it is a phenomenal challenge to identify what is that kernel.
Well, the biggest problem is,
if you think about Metroid Prime, there's a great example of
completely different.
We have to completely change this game. We're going to a first-person perspective. Yeah. Like what that does to the world of Metroid is so huge. But what they figured out was all that matters is the exploration. All that matters,
and it's the feeling of isolation.
Is that feeling of isolation and that exploration? And when they pinpointed that, it seemed like everything else fell into place and made sense.
I would say it's the definitive Metroid. That's debatable, but I guess one of the toughest.
I was literally just talking to someone about Super Metroid who would come up here and punch you in the face if you heard you say that.
Carolyn Pettit is. We have had many discussions about that. I just think Prime is Metroid to me.
You're wrong.
But I guess one of the problems that Capcom.
Fuck you, Tom. No.
Well, I'm definitely right about
this.
No,
God.
One of the
I actually don't have a strong opinion about Metroid one way or the other.
One of the challenges that Capcom faces with trying to what is Resident Evil is this is Mikami's baby.
Yeah.
This is what he did, and he is gone, and it's so hard for someone else to jump in. I mean, we're trying to do it by saying, "Oh, it's tension," but to understand the core of a game. I would trust Shigeru Miyamoto to understand Mario because it's he knows Mario, but jumping in. And it's someone who's probably never even met Mikami is trying to make this game, and it's that's really
difficult.
People
also forget Inafune was pretty big into Resident Evil development as well.
And Inafune is because there's a couple of those guys from Capcom who left and did other things, Platinum and
More
stuff.
Than
And
a
it's they're not there anymore.
That's really the big problem for Capcom is that they have you hear this sentiment about Capcom and you hear it about Sega of they got all these great IPs. Why don't they use them? It's they do have all these great IPs. You're right. But do you want the people that are there now using those? Because that's clearly from RE6, Lost Planet 2. These are not the dudes that you necessarily want going back and trying to revitalize these IPs that these old games, these old properties that you treasure so much.
I feel like Konami got really lucky that they still had Kojima on hand. Not that he's going anywhere, but they had
to have pictures or something, right? It's the only reason.
But they had their young staff working on Metal Gear Rising, and as Kojima puts it, they basically came to him and were like, "No, we can't do this. We can't do this." If he wasn't there, the company would say, "Too bad. Put your head down, get back to work, finish the game." They're really lucky they missed that book.
This idea that what you just brought up kind of contradicts what we talked about with Cliffy B. He might have been that person who was really good at overseeing, and things might not work as well from a game development standpoint without him over everything. So
by many accounts, Kojima shows up about once a month and says, "Yeah, all right, looking good."
But that seems like what Shigeru Miyamoto does now. I guess it's if you have that dude.
But that dude can inspire the staff.
True.
Because the staff needs someone to look up to.
Yeah, exactly. And he can also jump in there and say, "This one thing needs to be changed," and that could be the difference between good and a bad.
Yeah. And he can also she can also delegate because they know their team and they know, okay, what is it that this game needs? All right, you're the person who can handle this. You take care of that. I mean, as far as as the exception to all of this stuff, you look at Platinum. And the crazy ass nonsense that they're able to come up with, both within existing IPs and with new products.
Yeah,
they're the exception, and that's because that's where all of this great talent went. That's where all of Capcom's best went. So if you want to see great Capcom games, go play some Platinum games.
It's interesting because Grasshopper is one of my favorite Japanese developers, just developers in general, and they understand that they have very serious limitations.
Mm-hmm.
And they make games that kind of avoid that. Capcom right now has very serious limitations, and they don't realize that. And they try to cover it up with a big budget and big names.
Yeah.
And until they realize who they are, you're going to keep getting games like RE6.
I think they just have no sense of self. I think you're right about that. They
I want
they
more
don't they
Resident
don't know
Evil.
who they are.
I want more Resident Evil Revelations because that game was great.
That game was great. We're going to finish this off with Pseudo Elite's comments. Capcom, Resident Evil can't please anyone. And I think it's perfect.
I rated a Slim Jim higher than Resident Evil 6 today
Oh, God.
on video.
And Slim Jims are disgusting.
Yeah.
Agreed.
20% of your sodium content.
It was only 1/10 of a point. So.
Yeah.
It earned it.
We got one more story for the day.
Yeah, so Reggie Fils-Aimé thinks that Miiverse will be the Wii U's killer app. It's kind of social networking thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, what is the Miiverse? Catch me up on this.
Yeah, so essentially it's a way for people to share information like within games. Like you can leave a message for your friends or for people, in the gaming world saying like, this level, you get stuck here, do this instead, Or you can kind of go into like the Mii Plaza on the Wii.
Okay.
So right now you see groups of people kind of meandering about.
Yeah.
You can see them meandering about in Miiverse around a specific game, and then you can go in there and see what people have to say. So it's like a Nintendo-specific social platform. And Reggie thinks it's gonna, kind of like Street Pass. People laughed at that, but now it's like kind of everyone who owns a 3DS that I know really enjoys that feature. He thinks that the Miiverse will be that for the Wii U. But considering what they're pitching it as like this social network for gamers. But really, it's just for people who own Nintendo stuff.
Yeah.
There's going to be censorship. He's on record saying it may take 30 minutes for your post to show up.
Yeah.
I know Nintendo has their whole, idea of being family friendly, at the forefront of everything. But you can't even post things to your friends without it being censored.
So my first thought was to laugh at this because it's preposterous. And then I thought about it, and if you look back at the November 2005 launch of the 360, people might remember Geometry Wars, Perfect Dark Zero, Call of Duty 2. The biggest thing that happened was achievements.
Yeah.
And that has shaped gaming across platforms.
But here's the thing.
Forevermore.
It happened.
Well,
It happened already.
no, but I guess
Like you're right. That was it. That was a huge moment. But what this is offering is not. It doesn't have that revelatory. It doesn't take it to another level.
Well, I don't know how far it's going to go yet, but I guess I have my fantasy of what it could be. And I picture something like Demon Souls where you walk around and there are hints on the ground written by other players that help you along.
This is very similar to that.
So if there is at a core system level an integration for every single game that involves
that's not going to be. It's not for every single game.
If there's an easy way to access tips and give tips and help people through these games.
Yes.
And I don't know how far widespread it's going to be, but that's kind of what they're hinting at a little bit. Like that does kind of change the game because then I don't have to go to my computer to look at YouTube, and I don't have to go to GameFAQs. All of a sudden, I have like Dark Souls, like this integrated help system, which is actually really interesting and might be as important as achievements in the long term because it's keeping you glued to the TV and invested all the time.
It's important that people use it for it to be useful. Right?
Oh, yeah.
That people contribute, and what is going to drive people to contribute? Like that's kind of the thing. Like you're going to have a lot of people who do, not the same guys who write GameFAQs, but that kind of mentality in a person that will drive them to provide stuff for people. But if there's not enough, this service is just kind of going to exist and just not really be used, to its full potential. And that's what it needs is its full potential realized for it to, I think, be a quote-unquote killer.
Well, it depends how easy it is to access it, because I think that's more important than the slight delay, because whatever, it's going to be 5 minutes, 20 minutes. I think if you can access it within, like, hitting the home button, you're immediately typing, and then you're back to the game, I think that makes it a lot easier. If they have a barrier
why
to
would
that,
why would you want to provide a tip? Wouldn't you
Why
rather,
would I?
Wouldn't you rather keep playing your game?
Well, when I play Dark Souls, and Dark Souls is very different because it is such a communal effort, even when you're playing alone. But when I play Dark Souls, I leave tips all the time. I talk about here's an invisible wall and here's an invisible path and these kind of things, and I leave those tips because it's fun and easy.
But Dark Souls is for crazy people. We can't apply lessons learned from Dark Souls.
I can't even argue against that.
No, I'm not saying it's bad, but it's
different than the people who play Mario.
It's for a very
also me.
a very small focus and specific audience, and because it is so punishing, like you benefit from people, leaving these tips. That's what inspires you to leave tips.
Yeah.
Is, hey, I'm getting something out of this from people. I want to contribute back to it, and you're invested in this one specific game in that way. For Nintendo, I think that what they have done with the street passing stuff on the 3DS has been really interesting. I don't know that I would call it successful, but it has absolutely gotten me to carry my 3DS around with me a whole lot more than I would have if that feature didn't exist.
Okay.
If that feature didn't exist, that thing would be sitting in the charging cradle at my house
I pull out Street
like
Pass
90% of the time.
Like if I have my 3DS with me and I see that green light, I'll pull out my 3DS before I'll pull out my phone to play.
Oh
the
yeah,
game. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
They got
that green
right.
light comes up. You're like, oh shit,
Crack.
dude. When PAX is coming up, when E3 is coming up, we all get super fucking excited. Like, oh, I'm gonna get so much Street Pass in. But even that is crippled by just a lot of stupid decisions.
Right.
A lot of like, you can only have 10 waiting for you at the time.
Yeah.
All of these things where you're like, there are ways that I could still be using this, and this system could still be great, but could be better designed. Nintendo has, other than this fluke of the Street Pass stuff, Nintendo has zero track record when it comes to doing good, interesting network stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll believe it when I fucking see it. And I would also like to. Can I read comments? Am I allowed to do that?
You can totally read a comment.
Can I jack that?
Sure.
Because I want to say this first comment that we have from Unwanted Spam. I agree with this sentiment 100%. Said, well, I wouldn't consider it a killer app, just an extra little something to use with your games. As it stands, the games need to be the killer apps here. Correct. No little bing bong or doodad or wibble wobble is going to be the thing that's going to make me go, my God, I need to get a Wii U. It's going to be a fantastic game.
Well, how important though?
However, that
was
said,
achievements though.
What's
Think
that?
about how big achievements was.
But
and how many
achievements didn't
games-
matter until the games were there and were good.
But how many?
They still don't matter to me.
How many bad games have you played because of achievements?
Many.
Zero in my case.
But okay, so I mean, we have the two
Yeah,
good
the two
case,
very extremes.
two good case
Yeah.
studies here of didn't matter, you don't care, you still play the hell out of some 360 games.
I'm with this guy because I want the good games. I don't care.
That's weird stance. Who wants good games?
I
You can
never
have a bing
never
bong.
understood the achievement thing. I don't get it.
The thing is that what the achievement thing did, the idea behind it, and then it kind of morphed into something weird and I'll admit a little disgusting.
Yeah.
The core idea was let's make leaderboards matter, let's make performance matter, and let's make it matter in a cross game way.
Let's build a social thing that people can relate to.
Sure, and to that regard, there had been nothing else like that before, and it gave them a little hook, and it definitely it extended the lives of games that you might stop playing at a certain point because you're like, all right, I've gotten everything that I wanted, even a good game.
Yeah.
Like let's forget about the sick thing of playing bad games just for achievements. Even a good game, you're like, okay, I played this as much as I would play this, but there's this achievement to do this specific
It can
thing.
provide motivation, but
It introduced
it's
like
rare.
new ways to play games also, which was always.
But I
interesting.
don't see like, what sounds like YouTube comments on my game
Yeah.
as being
So
If I'm playing the next one-
life changing.
And it almost could get in the way, right? Like I'm likely to turn this off if I'm playing an adventure game and I see a little like me head floating, like this wall, like hit this wall to get the next heart. I would be like, no.
that is a good point. So
I'm just gonna use it constantly, and every single time it's just gonna be Snape killed Dumbledore. That's all it's gonna say.
Oh no, you're ruining
Just every
Prince.
single one. Like, fuck. I'm gonna include the end of Breaking Bad, and
Just spoilers everywhere.
just that's all it's gonna be.
And they'll let them through because they're not going to put swear words in there. So their censorship won't even catch it.
Well, actually, interesting enough, there is a spoiler checkbox you can put.
That's so great.
I will say that in their defense, that is a good thing.
So I think it is.
You know what? That shows me that they're thinking about this more than I would have assumed.
Yeah.
So at a conceptual level, maybe Nintendo will get it, maybe not. But I think we all agree that there is a kernel of something here.
It's not an evil, and I think it'll help them in some regard.
How would you make a social network for the Wii U, for the PS4? How would you make it so it's actually interesting?
I wouldn't worry
I'd
about
make it Facebook. I
Yeah.
mean, like the whole like
You
we're
have
gonna make our
Raptor.
own social network thing. Like I don't want to be.
Raptor's already doing it.
I don't want to be a part of Orkut. I don't need yet another third tier social networking platform to be involved in.
I think the idea that I described could be interesting, but it has to be well integrated and really easy to use.
But they could just integrate Facebook. They could integrate.
But I also don't think it's going to have that. I know you're Tom. You're trying to draw the comparisons to the achievement stuff here. I think even best case scenario, I'd be very surprised if it had that kind of impact, or even had the potential for that kind of impact.
I don't think it will, but I guess I think it has the potential, and we've kind of turned up our nose at Nintendo through the years for a variety of things that turned out to be better than we expected.
It can grow.
I just think there's a chance that they might be onto something, and I wouldn't be surprised if they drop the ball and Sony picks it up and they score a touchdown.
But then, Reggie will also say that everything is the best and will change the world at every turn. So
it's hard. It's hard to accept that.
Just to keep them in the news cycle
and to hit every customer that
for him to say, this is going to be fucking awesome, you guys, about literally any feature that they have coming. So
yeah, well, he can't really talk about games because that lineup, which I think is pretty good, there's not one game you can hang your hat on from a Reggie Fils-Aimé perspective. So
not on that level, no.
Yeah. So he has to go outside the box a little and kind of tickle people's, tickle zone.
I will not let Reggie ever touch my tickle zone.
Yeah, no. I've seen Reggie in person.
Hands off, bud.
He looks like he has rough hands.
Yes.
Very calloused.
Yeah.
And huge.
That guy
could palm 2 basketballs with one hand. That's how big that paw is.
Yes. So we're gonna go to our last section of the day. It's called "Didn't See That Coming."
This section changes every week.
It changes every week. This is there's a couple stories that kind of jumped out as where the hell did that come from? The first one, NBA Live 13 was canceled 6 days before it was supposed to come out.
Woo!
6 days.
I love this story so much.
Why do you love this story?
I love it because, the NBA Elite story was so crazy.
Because Elite was the rebranded Live from last year. I think.
2 years ago
that they canceled.
So NBA Elite 11 was NBA Live was in the shitter. 2K was killing them on the quality and on the sales front. So like, all right, let's stop using the NBA Live name. Let's come up with a whole new franchise, NBA Elite. We're gonna build from the ground up,
new IP,
whole new thing, new IP. And then that demo came out with all of like the Christ pose, T pose characters.
Andrew Bynum.
We're not going to bother animating or rigging. We're just.
And then
I love it.
And then they had to cancel that one, and that one was even closer. They made copies. They shipped them out. There were retail copies in the wild of that game.
I do have a friend who has a retail copy of that one.
Who had to pass the 11th hour say, just take that back. And they said, okay, what we're going to do? We're going to take a year off, which I'm like, great, smart, best idea you guys could have had. Like, let's not push this. Let's actually take our time. I don't personally care about basketball games, but if you're going to do a new basketball game, think about it. Like, all right, and we're going to bring back the Live name. Great. NBA Live has a long and storied history. There have been great NBA Live games in the past. The name has, resonates probably positively with enough people that let's do it. And they were, showing it at E3 this year. They were revving up to put it out, and then 6 days.
6 days
before it was supposed to come out, like, we're not going to do this one either. We talked about this some on the Bombcast this week, and I just, God, I feel for the person that got yelled at by Peter Moore. So about this stuff.
We've talked about Cliffy B and Shigeru Miyamoto and other guys in charge and how good things run when there are people following them. Who the heck is in charge? I mean, we know Peter Moore's in charge of, like...
Well, he's about EA in general.
Things are going... Yeah, he's a CEO now.
Yeah.
Things are going very poorly at EA, and they make terrible decisions over and over. This is embarrassing.
Yeah.
Like, how do you get so far without realizing your game is crap? And I give them props for saying this game is crap and we're not going to release it. Yeah. But at the same time... What is going on over there? This is really bad news for them if they can't do this.
It speaks to like what may be some profound organizational issues at that company.
Yeah, I know Peter is crushed by this. What was your first reaction when you saw this story?
So what?
So what? That's all you got?
Yeah, dude. I mean, give me Bulls versus Blazers. Give me
and the NBA playoffs.
John Madden football. 89.
Yeah.
They've also got a tough situation here because 2K is crushing it with their basketball games. They are doing so well with those games that they're killing it on sales. Critically, those games are much beloved.
Yes, that franchise is special.
That for whatever it is that comes back, I have to believe that NBA Live 13 was just bad for them to have canceled it this way. But for them to come back now 3 years after leaving basketball, whatever they come back with has to be so good for it to matter.
So
it's Sisyphean in scope of how difficult a task they have in front of them.
Good or bad?
That I really I feel for everyone on that development team.
Good or bad, will we see NBA Live 14 next October for the PS4 and the Xbox 720 and the Wii U? Will we see this next October?
I think it's their only shot. I think that the hardware transition is the only opportunity that they have. It's the only open here, because enough changes, like, the 2K, the NBA 2K team, they're comfortable with their platform, they're comfortable with their engine, they know what it can do, they know how to to goose it up. But making that hardware shift, that can be a big stumble for a lot of people. You clearly don't see all of the power of the new platform, in that first iteration of games like this. They're still going to have to keep making them for the old systems as well. So if EA is in a position to really put a lot of time and money into this new hardware and make something that just runs on that, rather than being loaded down by that legacy support, there's a chance. There's a chance that if they do that, and then also if 2K stumbles in the transition, like that's their only opening for this.
What do you think, Peter? Do you think we'll see one next October?
That's a tough call, man. I don't know. If they're really trying to get up from this stumble, like, it might take another year.
See,
and that's also a good point, is that if they weren't able to do this, although maybe they canned this specifically to focus on this,
so they wouldn't ruin
this next gen stuff.
See, but when you look at the history,
but they don't have that much time.
When you look at the history, Madden 2006 for the 360,
yeah,
the first Madden for the 360 was terrible.
Yeah,
they are really bad at first entries in new consoles. So, like, I totally
everyone
agree.
Resets. When it comes to sports games, everyone resets.
But
that one was exceptionally bad. I agree.
That was exceptionally bad, though. Like
look at Madden on the 3DS. There's another example.
There's no multiplayer.
Their first shot at a sports, existing sports franchise on a new platform, they have trouble with it. But it also, like, the annualized cycle on sports games demands that you kind of create a base, and then you are adding little features to it each year.
But
if you have to carry all of that from one generation to the next, that's a lot. And that kind of takes away, like, what they could potentially improve on. So you reset it.
It's very difficult to compete with 2K, I think, even with that. But I do agree that that's their only chance is to get out there next October. So we'll see. The final story, one of my favorite stories of the week. Free Halo 4 armor for those who watch debates on Xbox Live.
Correction, free Halo 4 armor for those who have it running on their Xbox and then change the channel to watch
something else. A very cynical stance. So what do you think about this mingling of video games and politics?
I mean, I guess what I was trying to say right there is that you can't make somebody care about something by giving them something totally unrelated. It doesn't work that way.
But there's no harm in incentivizing it.
No, I don't know. I'm not saying
and if that means that some percentage, even if it's small, some percentage of people end up watching the debates that would not have otherwise, great.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
no harm.
see it. It's not an evil.
To your point of, like, are a lot of people just going to, or did a lot of people just load up the app long enough to, get the thing and not actually paying attention to it? I'm sure a ton.
Yeah.
Like, not to be cynical about it, but yeah. There's probably a lot of people who, I just want the Halo thing, whatever, man.
Is this armor got, like, American flags just all over it?
It's a flag.
And an eagle, just a...
See, I would like it better if it was, like, red or blue, depending on which...
it's not bad.
I don't know.
Or
if you, like, download the Obama app or download the Romney app, and depending on that, you get a different colored armor.
Could you get, like, in the NHL, they have helmets with big, like, faces and, like, animals on them? Could you get, like, the Obama, like...
That would be pretty.
The Romney one would be more terrifying because he's got that grin.
He does.
Shit-eating grin.
Well, I'm a member of the Green Party, bro.
So when I heard this, I was really happy because I think, like, expanding the audience for politics, which are really important, is a good thing. And I actually have, like... I have a good thing to say about Greg Goodrich from Danger Close, because one of the things he says he wants to do with, like, Medal of Honor is he wants people to play it and then care more about what's going on in Afghanistan and do research.
Yeah.
And it's like, I really respect having that gateway, that link between, like, I kind of like video games and all of a sudden I'm going to jump into something that's more important than video games. So I don't know if there's anything evil behind what Microsoft did, but
Nothing evil.
I really support what they did, and I hope that people actually took advantage, even if the debates are really difficult to watch.
And I mean, they started doing this like when the convention stuff was happening. They didn't incentivize it, but they made that stuff all available. You know, the NASA stuff. You know, the Curiosity stuff. That was all. They didn't have to do any of that stuff, but by doing so, they opened up this content, these ideas to people who would not have sought it out on their own or would not have been, at the places where like they wouldn't have been watching network TV or, NASA TV or wherever else that information was going to be put out otherwise. So,
and then Microsoft gains because all of a sudden you associate big events with the Xbox and you want and they're intertwined somehow and they need that.
And serious events, like culturally relevant events. So I think that's smart, and it's also all these guys are like everyone from Microsoft, Sony, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, whoever, they're starving for content. These online streaming video, they're starving for just something to put out there, and to have something of like a certain amount of weight and consequence. And to be able to put that into your programming, I think is rock solid. So
I was really happy. I turned on my TuneIn app on my phone, and I was going to search for the debates, and it was on automatically, just loaded. They knew that people needed to listen to this, so I'm happy that it's getting just a push in all these places that don't necessarily get that push.
That said, they could have found a better picture of Chelsea Clinton to have on my Xbox dashboard. That thing scared the shit out of me. I found that image for like the 2 weeks or whatever that was up there really disturbing. I'm sure Chelsea's a nice girl. I have nothing bad to say there.
Classy lady.
Yep.
We're going to end on that note. So thank you for watching another episode of Code for Truth. I'm Tom Mchea, and I was joined by Peter Brown and Ryan Davis. Leave your comments. We will quote the best ones next week. Later.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.